What's up? Welcome to Tales Tomorrow. I'm Morrow, your storyteller for today, and with me I have some... Wait a minute, that's not RPG horror stories. That's email submissions. We got some email submissions for today. Let's start off with the first one that we got right now. A story how I double tapped the already dying project. Hello again, dear Morrow. Creator of Ultimate Tiefling Wooby and the player that got fired is back, and now I feel like 100% at fault for what transpired, but also might have been for the best. I've been playing an online D&D game in an original Slavic folklore-inspired world for a few months since last year. I joined in the middle of things and pretty quickly got to be an important member due to being the only veteran player and, well, a good player, I guess. Over the months, nothing really bad happened, besides me losing my first character due to a horror micro-story in which one of the oldest player's characters fortunately put an obviously shady necklace of fireballs on my character's neck, making the curse immediately activate so she couldn't take it off, and sessions later died due to having to use the entire thing in panic, trying to defeat one of the BBGs in one go, which unfortunately failed due to a bit of an unlucky roll, which also activated the effect of the curse, starting to strangle my Dryad cleric, and I ultimately couldn't roll high enough to save her twice in a row. Her neck got crushed, just like the skeleton that had the necklace initially. Damn, that is a really brutal way to just kill off a character just like that. Imagine working on a character that has been like through all this adventure and then I guess inadvertently gets handed a necklace of fireballs that turns out to be cursed and chokes its user just to be like, okay, roll for choking, or whatever the choking roll would be. Constitution, I guess. Oh, you failed. Okay, roll again. You failed again? Well, your character inadvertently dies to a really dumb gimmick. And yes, I'm gonna call it a dumb gimmick because I feel like if your character died just to 2 bad rolls and stuff and that's the end of the story right there, then that kind of feels like a little bit like a dumb gimmick. I understand the adventurer's life is dangerous and wrought with all kinds of danger and cursed items are a thing, but I feel like if you're not gonna give somebody a chance to do something about it, like I understand if the necklace started getting tighter and then the player had like a deadline, like, you know, in game 3 days before you completely lose your consciousness because the necklace suffocates you completely, that'd be one thing, but to die just to 2 rolls and get really badly unlucky, damn dude, that is brutal. But I'm not here to tell this one, I'm here to share how everything abruptly ended and how I had a hand in it. Our party, there were actually 3 separate groups, but ours was the main one, consisted of me and 3 other players. The important one being a young college-age dude, who I'm gonna call the Hothead. The name is speaking louder than words because that's basically his entire personality. If anything revs him up, he'll go a bit ballistic, loud, angry, pushy, but he's not a bad dude, just a bit immature and emotional, and he knows it, and will always apologize if he did something genuinely wrong after cooling down. Plus, he's probably the best player of the group, besides myself, and he's also a novice, just like the rest. I like him, despite issues, and so did the others. Except the DM, at least by the end of things. The Hothead often had something to say towards other players, besides me. He seemed to genuinely appreciate my actions and roleplay, sometimes avowedly, sometimes not so much, but it's coming from a genuinely feeling of being slighted or something being wrong on the narrative or mechanical side in his eyes. He could get that way in the middle of the game, but he tried not to go into tirades and always tried to leave it for after the game was finished. That's when he would genuinely go off. Players didn't mind that much, I got used to it, I guess. Always seemed friendly, but the same could not be said about the DM, as it turned out. Going off on other players, I'm assuming it's towards a feedback or like, you know, this was mechanically not right, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right, how dare you roleplay your character this way? Like what kind of going off are we going on about? Like, are they just getting you to somebody for saying, hey, you roleplaying your character incorrectly, or hey, why'd you use healing word here instead of guiding bolt? That could end the fight several rounds back. Like what sort of a going off are we talking about here? Is this like constructive feedback to make somebody like a better role player and better play mechanically in general, or is it just like, hey, you didn't play the way I think you should have played, or you didn't say the thing that I think you should have said personally, and therefore I'm gonna go off on you? Because at some point constructive criticism doesn't turn constructive, helpful comments don't turn helpful. It's just like yelling from a peanut gallery, you know? Like at some point, if that's just what the player's gonna be doing every single time, like after every session and in the middle of the session, I feel like that would get a little bit grating to everybody. Imagine if for whatever reason you had your character's motivations or the way you roleplay your character or the way you mechanical played the character be criticized and somebody always went off on you. At some point, I feel like they'll get grating on anyone's ears, and this is just me talking just from my own perspective, right? If somebody decided to say, hey, Morrow, instead of Eldritch Blasting here, you should have hexed and then Eldritch Blast. It's like, dude, I was already using my bonus action for something else in general, but like at the end of the day, let me play my character. It's fine. It's not a big deal. The guy will die in 3 rounds anyway, so it's fine. I guess it depends on the type of of game you guys are playing. If it's a game where optimal decisions are rewarded greatly and non-optimal decisions are punished, then maybe that could be a little bit like a pressure to like, okay, we got to make sure everybody's in shape. But to criticize other people's role play and go off on them, I don't really know much about that because I feel like that's sort of unnecessary. Anyway, I don't prejudge things ahead of time, but I feel like if things are kind of getting grating a little bit, maybe that was just like a balloon that eventually popped sort of situation. Let's continue. The thing about the DM, he does not appreciate others going against what he wants or expects, but most of the time you wouldn't know that since he's very good at wearing a mask. However, on an accident, really, I learned how he truly is, how he feels. When I wanted to ask him to be allowed to play an alternate ranger, ballet, or llama, since I generally think it's better to take on a subclass, I wasn't even pushing him, just discussed and try to understand why the hard no, when at the same time he allowed the entire new subclasses, including pretty damn wild ones, but not just a remake of Ranger, not even a new class. He would not budge and he would get fuming, dripping toxin, hateful even. I saw how he truly felt. I'm kind of curious on what the DM would say because I have read Laser Llama's version on Alternate Ranger. I think it was the one covered by D&D Shorts a couple of videos back, but either way, it's a pretty good Ranger. I highly recommend everybody checking it out. If you guys are playing on a VTT, however, and if a player of mine asked, hey, I want to play a Ranger, but I don't want to play the current Ranger that we got with current subclasses, I would like to play the Alternate Ranger, could you make that happen? I would say probably no myself too, mostly because from a technical perspective, I would have to, as a DM, go on Foundry and then create a brand new class, not just modified Ranger as it is, but create a brand new class with its own features, its own bells and whistles, its own tables and stuff. I had to physically, mechanically create everything so it'll be automated in Foundry. So that's the only reason I would personally say no, because that'd be a lot of work, specifically just to set up a whole thing for one player to play the alternate Ranger, and then maybe potentially having be entire reward if more players want to play it specifically there. If let's say, for example, you guys are playing through like, I don't know, Roll20, I think, which kind of automatically sets things up where you just download stuff and just use it, or if you're playing through like other TTRPG systems or in person, that would be one thing. But also I understand why DM will probably want to say no, because I had to relearn Ranger and relearn how the new Ranger works and stuff and be able to bookmark certain features and things and to understand it correctly. If you already are used to one type of Ranger and the player is asking to play a different type of Ranger, then I feel like that would be a lot of pressure on the DM, specifically from their perspective. Now, regarding the vitriol and toxicity the DM like gave towards you, I'm curious on that because I feel like the easiest thing to do if you just don't want to run a different or alternate Ranger as a DM, you just say, no, sorry, I just won't be able to be prepared for it. I'm prepared with all the already current Rangers and stuff. So it really depends on the situation. Like if it's a mechanical chore just to set up the Ranger and everything, then I completely understand where the DM is coming from. However, if they're being like really toxic and mean to you, I don't agree with that whatsoever. At the time, I just decided to drop the issue and went with a cool subclass, also by LL, instead of push the shifter nature of the character even more. Shifter Conclave adapted to vanilla Ranger, basic Ranger with more Druid, which made him go completely back to his mask like nothing ever happened. I should have kept this in mind and regret not doing anything about it. Maybe I'm right. Maybe just technically, on the technical side of things, maybe just easier to implement this. I mean, I don't know, man. Like for me, it's easier to implement a subclass than implement a whole new class and be able to set up a whole new class with all its automations on Foundry. But that's just a technical thing. Subclasses are a lot easier because like, oh, Barbarian, a different Barbarian that you find online on Homebrew. I know how Barbarian plays, but this subclass, it's a lot easier to bounce around for a subclass than it is for a whole rework of class, to be completely honest. So, I mean, on a technical side of things, I'm with the DM, but maybe there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. Back to the hothead. After some recent events during which he really went far with accusations and issues, feeling like the DM was targeting or being unfair to him, DM just kicked him and refused to speak. Now, let me make this clear. Hothead's criticism and concerns were both valid and not. Some of it did feel like genuinely overbearing in regard to his character. He got shafted a lot, even killed a few sessions before just to be resurrected immediately. This was a pretty good dramatic scene though, and it's partially my fault as well, but he never actually took it against me, appreciating being so in character. But on part, it was his own fault for making specific choices and allowing DM to take things forward, but then again, he did not expect a lot what would transpire. Basically, his character was pretty much the anime protagonist in regards to all his suffering and power together. Big on both parts, which was done by DMs from players' decision. If it would be just that, I could understand, I guess, and move on, but what I learned from others were telling me the additional info made me even more concerned. And that I took over everything over the past month and got heated myself, I guess. Here's an important part that you know I've said before in the comments, but readers and viewers may not know, so I'm repeating. I am Russian. Здравствуйте. I live in Russian Federation, so most of the others in group and on the server, excluding one Ukrainian living in Ukraine, who's also in our main group. DM, however, is in Baltics, and I don't remember his specific nationality. I'm saying all this because there's a reason for the hothead's last sentence before he got kicked. You know, I consider you a close acquaintance, but you apparently did not, since I'm such a bad Russian. And you are the king of D&D. Bad Russian sounds like a sex company name, or like a sex product name. Like Bad Dragon, except Bad Russian. Ooh, you touch my tra-la-la. My ding-ding-dong. There was a seed of truth to that, as the DM did occasionally let this past his mask, his disdain and hate. After that, I started to rethink my own experience, and well, I need to both know the whole truth and make the two start behaving like adults. Because the DM just basically got rid of him, refused to engage in any way, and even started to passive-aggressively try to push the players to decide who they're going to play with when the planned game of the Hothead landed on the day the DM planned to run his own. Although not necessarily that exact day, but he still told us to choose, that he isn't going to make us, despite basically doing that by shifting the burden. So Hothead got kicked out of the game and decided, you know, it's screwed, I'm just gonna run my own game, and invited the other players in there. And basically the games are kind of on the same day, but not really the same day, so technically players can play together. I don't know exactly what's going on with the DM's perspective, but maybe there was some conversation that happened behind the scenes, or maybe Hothead's behavior just got enough for the DM potentially. There could be that going on, and obviously communication would help things go further. From the way you describe things, it doesn't seem like DM and Hothead are great at communicating together, or maybe one is great communicating, but the other one isn't reciprocating it. It's really kind of a guess, honestly, at who could be who. At the same time, it's just me doing a lot of assumptions here, but you know what they say about assumptions, it makes an ass out of you and me, and I'm a big ass, I'm a big tiefling ass, I guess. The statement about kicking somebody because they're a bad Russian, seriously, still one of the funniest names. Why don't adult product companies use that at this point for marketing? It could be a possibility that maybe somebody does kicking somebody out because they're being a bad Russian, or potentially it could be that the behavior of the Hothead is just getting too much for the DM to handle. Like you said, they get very, very heated and start criticizing and commenting about stuff all the time, especially after games, but sometimes mid games. So maybe the DM does receive a lot of that on the back end, and maybe it's just getting too much for them to handle. There could be a problem with both the DM and the player, and both are in the wrong. And in fact, the solution is maybe they just don't mesh well together, like chemistry wise, and they just shouldn't be playing together. The DM to say that you guys are gonna have to decide whether you play my game or that guy's game is a little bit of a weird thing to phrase in that specific way. I mean, if the two players aren't playing together, if the DM and the Hothead can play together and they just run their own games, as long as it's being scheduled for different times, I think it should be okay. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, like if Hothead and DM decide to schedule the same game on a Saturday night and everybody wants to join for one game or the other, I guess it really ultimately would be up to the players to do so, I guess. I don't know. I decided that I'll do anything to make them talk and get over this stupid predicament. So I started publicly pushing him behave like an adult. More than that even, because at the same time, a day or two later from the kick, the Hothead was already very much willing to talk and get it over with, while this grown-ass man with a job stood his ground and refused to move. I pressured him, pressured a lot. Even the other two players of the group joined in a bit, and the DM on the other game of this game's server, who's probably the most reasonable, adult, and powerful despite being toxic AF. As well, but he just would not budge. Man, just by being toxic. Oh, it's interesting that you put in the fact that they're also toxic AF. Do you like the people you're playing with, or is it just like a side comment and stuff? Just like, yeah, they're really powerful and smart and everything, but also toxic AF. It's like, wow, it's a little bit, it feels just a little bit underhanded, you know? But he just wouldn't budge, to the point that after a few hours of trying to get through and explaining how it would go and others supported the idea, I just said that, okay, if you're so stubborn, then to hell with this, I'm washing my hands off of this, and left the discussion and any interaction on that server completely. If I couldn't actively pressure him into talks, then I wouldn't do that passively. Getting people to want to hash it out and talk it out is a great thing. However, pressure can lead to, well, if you think about like I don't know, anything that holds pressure, like a heater or something, or like a pipe, right? Too much pressure and it goes whoosh and bursts. If you want to be assertive, get somebody to just hash it out and talk it out is a good thing, but too much pressure can make things pop and break, and I honestly wouldn't recommend going like with a lot of pressure, you know? Some time needs to be done in order to cool off, and putting pressure only adds to the heat, and the last thing you want to do is get too much heat, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's like a pipe. It's gonna burst and everybody's gonna burn, and my eyes, you know? That's when I basically sealed the fate, as it turned out to be a mistake. As when, after a few days, he went to my DMs right after one of the other players in our group told me how the DM talked to him in full panic mode, not knowing what to do with me, if I'm ignorant or what. And I just doubled down on what I said earlier, repeating the same phrase, just slightly expanded. Right after that, he pinged everyone and said, "Unfortunately, the game is dead, sorry." Which then followed an hour or so ago with an expanded explanation portraying that's like that he doesn't want to be a babysitter anymore and solve the issue between others, only barely accepting that, yeah, some of that was because of me, but that doesn't change anything. So not only he refused to actually solve anything and actively told me prior, let me be selfish, he refused to even accept that this is all because of his ego. However, this could have been at least kept on life support if I did not double down. It is also my fault, I just want to make things right, you know? Alas, pushed too far, I guess. I'm sorry for this when it comes to other players, especially the ones in other groups. I did not want the DM to stop, I didn't expect him to go scorch earth over this. I should have expected that in all honesty, but I could not get over my own need for justice. That is the end for now, at least. Yet again, I'm saying, don't repeat my mistakes. But now I'm also telling you, D&D is a social thing and communication in earnest is important. I hope this time the message gets to you in time and manner, and not in a few months later. Respectfully, Radio. Yeah, I'm sorry, I've been a little bit late with emails and stuff. I'm so sorry. But also, I guess the best lesson we have is cooler heads will prevail. One of the most easiest things, the easiest like lessons out there that other people say, but they never really think about it too much and too hard. When there's a lot of like hot-headedness going on, a lot of pressure, a lot of heat. But I feel like if things were allowed to be cooled off, then cooler heads would prevail in the situation. Things would have calmed down, let things simmer, let people think about their actions, let them think about what they've done, and then afterwards, maybe there could have been a chance for some sort of dialogue to get things, you know, to bury the hatch eventually. I guess the only thing I can really say is, like I said before, cooler heads will prevail, and sometimes things need time to cool off before you can get things done and solved properly. If it's not an immediate emergency, and really TTRPGs aren't really an immediate emergency to be honest, then let things cool off, let people think about what they've done, and once everybody's cooled off and can think clearly, let the cooler heads prevail, and then the hatch can be buried to move things forward. In the meantime, it's best not to put pressure on things unnecessarily. I understand wanting to nudge things along and move things forward, especially if somebody's being stubborn about it, but too much pressure can make things burst. And I guess inadvertently, you did end up learning your lesson here that too much pressure is a little bit too much. Sometimes it's best just to step back, step away, let things cool off, and then come back to it a week later or something, you know, be like, yo, can we like talk it out and solve it out and stuff, you know? And with that, that's gonna be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales Tomorrow. Bye-bye.